Hello everybody. In this video I will not only rebuild Airbnb's website, but I'm also going to add some interactions to it to really show the full potential of Webflow and the things you can do with it. As always, the resources, so stuff like images, Lottie files, logos, all that stuff will be linked in the description. I have a GitHub repository where you can just download all the files and complete this along with me. Okay, let me just explain what we're going to be doing. Okay, so this is the first thing that we're going to be building. So this is the navbar. So we have these nav links, right? And as you hover, this kind of this kind of line just appears beneath it. Then this has this kind of border radius and these icons, and that's the first part of the navbar. Then there's this part, which is kind of just like places like to submit the form. And then we have our hero section. Now as you scroll, you see that like the Airbnb's actual website, it kind of moves up and it covers up this first entirety of the upper navbar. Okay, so moving on to the hero section. So this part has an image, some text, and a button with like this gradient text that we can learn how to do. Now, here is when I really start using Webflow's interactions. So up here on the top, as you can see, I have a scroll bar that kind of indicates how far we are through the page. So as we scroll, it just like moves with us. So like at 0%, there's no scroll, but if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, it fills up the entire page. Okay, so that's one of the interactions we're going to be building. Then next up we have this this card. So when you hover over this card, it flips to reveal the back of it, and that's kind of happens with all these cards. So this is something that isn't included in Airbnb's original website, but we're going to be doing this in Webflow to add some more interactions. And then next up, these cards also have their own interactions. So as you hover, we get like a little bit more information. So as you can see, this says things to do on your trip, but from the bottom comes up like a specific thing you can do in this text. So the background image scales, it darkens, this text comes in from the bottom, and also this text here. Then we have this section, which is a pretty simple section with just some like an image to the side and some text and a button. And this one is an image that has some text over it and a button. And then last but not least, we have our footer, which has all these links and icons. So that is the Airbnb website that I made in Webflow with some interactions. So the first thing we're going to be building is the navbar. So in our case, we have a navbar with a logo, some nav links, and when you hover on these nav links, you get these kind of lines popping up underneath, and then there is another nav link here and some icons. So that's exactly what we're going to be building. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag a navbar element. Give it a class of navbar. Set the flex direction to be vertical, because in our navbar we're going to have this part, and we're also going to have the search part, which we'll get to in just a second, but right now just set it to be vertical, and just center aligned and center like that. I'm going to give it some padding, so maybe 20 pixels at the top, 20 pixels at the bottom, and 100 pixels to the left, and 100 pixels to the right. I'm going to set the background to be transparent, and I'm going to change all the stuff inside here. So I'm going to grab the container div right here and just take everything out of here. Grab the div block, and just plop it inside there instead. There we go. Give it a class of nav. Oh, have to get rid of that container. Okay, there we go. So nav. This nav is going to have a width of 100%, and it's going to be flexed horizontal, right? Center line, and then pushed all the way like that. Space between. And I'm going to give it some margin at the bottom because, again, we have this search element, so I just want to give it that margin. And that's pretty much it. So now what I'm going to do is select this brand here, give it a class of nav brand, set the width to be 105 pixels, and I'm just going to drag in my two logos. So I have two logos, and I'll explain why there are two. So let me just go back to here, right, to our demo page. As we kind of scroll, our navbar condenses, right? So all this, all the middle stuff just kind of goes away, and you're left with this, this like pinker logo instead of the white one that we saw before. That's why we need two of them. And to kind of show that better, because it is white, I am just going to grab another div. Place it after the nav bar, give it a class of hero. We'll be working on this in the next section. So, but yeah, so a width of 100%, a height of 65 VH. I'm just gonna go down here, set the background color to be black, right? And I'm gonna hit position relative. Then I'm gonna grab this nav bar and hit position absolute, so that it's placed over this hero here, and just give it a width of 100% like that. Okay, so now we can see the logo. Let me just go back into here. Okay, so that's our logo. Then I am actually going to drag in the second logo of ours, which is this one. Okay, now these two are kind of overlapping each other, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give both of them a class. Call this one nav logo, and this one the same. Nav logo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set both of them to be positioned absolutely. And I'm going to grab our second one, this red one here, give it a class of red, just named appropriately, and just decrease the opacity. We'll bring up that opacity again when we scroll down. But for right now, this is how we want it to be. So that is our nav brand. The next thing that we have is our nav menu. So nav menu. This one is just going to be flexed horizontally, just centered like that. Okay, that's that part of the nav menu. Then I'm going to grab this one, call this nav. Then I'm going to grab a div actually, and I'm going to give the div a class of nav link, and then I'm going to grab this what's named nav link and just call that nav link text. And the reason I'm doing that is because we also want this line to appear underneath, right? So to be able to do that, what we have to do is we just have to like place both of them in the same div, so that the text and also the underline, or the line underneath. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is give it a size of 16 pixels, change the font to a font that isn't here. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit add fonts, and Webflow is connected to Google Fonts, so we can just pick a font. I already have one picked out. It's called Nuneato Sans. So I'm just going to find that. I tried to find the one most similar to Airbnb's own font. They have their own font that they use. I actually just forgot the alphabet. Never mind. It comes after this, and after M. I guess I could just type it in. There, Nuneato. We're going to scroll down just a little bit and find Nuneato Sans. And I think we need the regular, the 600, the 700, and the 800. I think that's about it. So I'm going to hit add font, and then we can close this out. Then we just have to refresh our page here, or wait a second until the green check mark appears, and then we'll refresh. Like that. And now if we go and try to change, let me make it white first. There we go. Now if we go and try to find Nunita Sands, there it is. Okay. What I also want to do is get rid of some of this padding. So the top will be 10 pixels and so will the bottom. And the left and the right will be 16 pixels. Okay. So this should say places to stay. Places to stay. And I'm just going to apply some, I'm going to get rid of these two. And just copy and paste this nav link a couple times. And okay. So that's good. Then what I want to do is, of course, the underline. Why did I duplicate it before the underline, you might ask? To that I would say I have no idea. Now I'm going to drag in a div into the nav link, and I'll call this nav link underline. Wow, that's not right. No, what am I doing? Rename it, so sorry. Nav link underline. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, just for demonstration purposes, give it a width of 100%, but we're going to make it 0 in just a second. So give it a height of 2 pixels, go down here, make it white, like that. There we go. And now I'll just make it 0%, which means you can't see it. Also, I want to go back to our nav link and actually give it some flexbox, because otherwise our nav link underline would come out from the left. So let me take that flexbox off just to show you. Okay, so now if we go and make an interaction, so mouse hover, we're going to call this nav link hover in, and what I want is for the underline to go to size, and we're just going to hit 10%, so barely there. Now if you look, it's coming in from the side, but we want it to be centered, right? So just go back to nav link, right? Flex, vertical, and then set them to center. Now if we go and hover, well, that still didn't. Now if we just add a couple more of these links, and if we try now, there we go, they come out from underneath. What we also want to do is have an hover out installed. So we're going to call this nav link hover out. And at that, I just want the size to be 0% again. But if you look closely, on our Airbnb site, we have one specific nav link that's active, which means it's the page that we're on. We don't have dynamic pages in this particular Webflow site, but if this were the actual Airbnb website, if you clicked on this kind of active underline, the one that's like always there even without you hovering, that one would be on this one. And if we click on that one, the active would switch over to there. So what we want to do is we want to make one kind of like that, right? So we're going to grab the nav link, give it a class of grab the nav link underline, right, on the first one, give it a class of active, and just have it default set to a width of 15%. Now that way it's always there. So that's the first nav menu. So I'm just going to duplicate this because we have a second one over here, right? So for that one, I'm going to get rid of this nav link, and also this one. We only want one, right? And for this one, what I want to do is, we don't even need the underline, right? So we're just going to get rid of this, right? That way we're only left with the nav link text. Then I'm going to give this nav link text a combo class of type 2. Because if you observe, when you hover over this one, this underline comes in, right? But when you hover over this one, there's kind of like a background radius, like a button thing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grab this, we're going to give it a radius of 20 pixels, and and when we hover on it, we want the background color to change to almost this off-white-ish. So it's, let me just copy and paste the hex code. It's 1A, 1A. So it's like this. So now when we hover, that happens. We also want to give that a transition, so we're going to go down to transitions, find background color, there. Okay. What we also want is this kind of section with the icons. So in our nav menu, I am also going to add an image, which is this one right here. Give it a class of nav icon. I'm going to grab this nav icon, and I'm actually going to hit Alt and Shift. That way this padding applies to all sides, right? And give it 12 pixels of padding. And get rid of that 18, there we go. So 12 pixels of padding. And then I'm going to drag in a div and call it nav sign in. And this nav sign in is going to have a background of white. And I'm just going to drag in a couple of these icons. So this one and that one is very giant for some reason. Just going to give it the same class, nav icon. And this one as well, nav icon. And then they're also just going to have a size of 40 pixels. And I'm going to grab this nav sign in, give it a border radius, and also a border, which will come in handy again when we do this kind of, as you go down here. As you can see, there's a border. Let me just scroll back up. As you can see, there's a border around the nav sign in. So right now, if we make it white, we can just change it to black later. So white here, perfect. So next up, we have the search section. So we're just gonna, not in there. So drag a div outside of this nav. So put it underneath. Give it a class of search. Give it a class of search. Give it a width of 70%. Set it to be flex, horizontal, center line, like that. And give it a maximum width of 1,000 pixels. So it never is like way too big. Then I'm gonna give it a background color of white, which you can't see yet, but you will in a second. A radius of 50 pixels. And a border of, again, 0.5 pixels and white, like you did with the one here. The next thing that I want to do is drag in a div. I'm going to call this div search item. And put 14 pixels padding on the top. 24 pixels padding on the left and the right. Leave it at 14 pixels. Just change the font to that. Make it black, which you can't see because there is no text, but that's good enough for now. And we're just gonna input the text. So location, where are you going? So location, where are you going? And I'm just gonna make 4 of these like that, and spread them apart evenly. So space between, sorry, not around, space between. Then I'm just gonna grab this top part here and just set it to be bold, and do that for all of them like that. Then when we hover on this search item, so on hover, just going to change the background color to this light grayish color, like that. And to kind of maintain with the whole search thing, we want to give this also a border radius of 50 pixels, like that, and give it a height of 100 pixels. So if we hit this and we hover over them, there we go. What I also kind of want to do is give it a width of 25% maybe. That way there is no kind of like gap like that. Okay, and then I'm just gonna hit cursor pointer. There. So that completes the kind of design portion of this nav bar. Now it's time to move on to the interactions. So I'm gonna grab the body element. I'm gonna hit element trigger, and I'm gonna hit the interactions panel, and then I'm gonna go click on page trigger. Now how I want this to work is when the page scrolls down, right? So when one scrolls down like this, then the kind of the search portion goes up and into there like that. So here's how we do that. We have to, first of all, we have to grab we have to make an animation called navbar, page scroll down. And then I'm just gonna grab our search element here, give it hit size and make it a little bit smaller than it is. So right now it's at 70%. I'll make it 50%, or actually 60. I'm going to grab the search element, hit size, and instead of having it be at 70%, make it 65% width. And then I'm going to move it. So go to move, the Y, and hit -80 pixels so that it moves up. Maybe make it -75, like that. And then I'm going to change its border color to be black. Because what's going to happen is that our entire nav, or just this nav portion here, actually is going to, so I'm just going to hit background color and make the nav white. And I'm going to grab the nav bar and change the background color to white. And I'm just going to place this after all this, that way you can see again the outline, right? And then I'm going to grab our second nav logo here, the one that's red, and I'm just going to increase the opacity on that one all the way to 100, right? And then I'm going to grab our first one, or like that, yeah, just increase the opacity of this full. And then I'm going to grab our nav menu, this thing here, and set the opacity all the way down to 0. So place that right after that. Then I'm going to get our nav link text. So that's this, right? And specifically this as well. So if you go back into our nav menu here, grab our nav link text, just change the text color to be black. So if we place this after all of that, I could just grab it like that there. Now you can see that. And then I'm going to grab the sign in, right? And we gave this a border color too. So I'm just going to make this black and then just place it after all of this. So if we look, that's what should happen. Okay. So let me hit save. Let's preview it. Okay, so that is our animation. Now, we want everything to reset when we scroll back down, right? So or we want everything to reset when we scroll back up. So what's really happening is that I forgot to see this, but it says when scrolled up. This should be in page scroll down. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a new animation for page scroll up and call it page scroll up. And we kind of just want to reset everything when we scroll back up, right, to how it was in the starting. So we are going to grab our search element, make size its usual width, so 70%, and then I'm going to move it back to its original state and set the border color back to white. Then I'm going to grab our navbar, set the background color back to transparent, which is what it always was. Then I'm going to get our second nav logo. This should be after, so navbar after, nav logo after that as well, and just set that to be 0. And then I want to get our nav menu, give that an opacity of 100. We're basically just redoing everything that we didn't do last time. So grab our nav link text, set the text color back to be white, and then our nav sign in, right, and give that a border color of white as well. So now if we hit this, and we actually can't scroll because this is as much as our page is worth, or there isn't anything to scroll, but so what I'm gonna do, because we can't do anything right now, I'm just gonna grab a div. I'm gonna call this filler. This is just for us to be able to see the animation. I'm just gonna make it like maybe 100 VH, right? That way we can actually scroll and see what's going on. So as we scroll, so this goes up into there like that. And this has a border, that has a border, the text color changes, and so does this logo. Okay, so that is it for the nav bar. Next up, we have the hero. So now we're going to be building this sort of hero section with this like cool gradient text button. So let's just get right into it. So we already have our hero kind of here that we kind of did to put our nav bar over. We just have like, the height set to 65 and the position relative. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually inside of the hero, I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to call this div block hero content wrapper. And I'm going to give this hero content wrapper some padding on the left, some padding on the right, a width of 100%, a height of 70 VH, and set it to be positioned absolutely. And so just position it down like that and just set 50% at the top. That way it's like halfway after the hero like starts itself, so like that. And actually maybe I'll make it 50 VH instead of 70, like that. Then inside of this content wrapper, I'm going to drag in another div, and this one is going to be called hero content. This is going to have a max width of 1240 pixels, flex vertical and center, and then justify to the end. I'm also going to give it a background image because this is the part, so that's this one, right? Hit cover and then hit center. Set the width to be 100% and also the height, like that. And now, of course, we need our text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a heading. This is going to be our heading 1. And it's going to have 24 pixels of margin on the bottom. I'm going to change the font, make it white instead. We can leave it at this bold and make it 55 pixels. Change it to, what does it say here? Just copy and paste this like that. And then I'm going to drag in a div block, which we need because we are going to be building this specific gradient button. Now if I just do it, let's try to do it without the div block. So I'm going to drag in a button, call this button secondary, only because there are other buttons on this page, like this one and this one, that we use way more than we use this one. So I kind of wanted to call this button secondary instead, because we only use it a couple times instead of the other one. So this button is going to have 16 pixels at the top of padding left, and then 32 pixels at the left and the right. Change the background color to white, and then change the text color to black just for now, because again we want the gradient text, right? I'm going to increase the size, make it 18 pixels, and then I'm going to add in our background color, which is going to be a linear gradient, and I'm going to have it faced 90 degrees, 90, and this is, so the first one is going to have this hex code, and then the last one is going to have this hex code, like that. And all we have to do is hit clip background to text. Now this looks good, right? Let me just increase the boldness, make it 700 maybe. Okay, and this looks good. This is giving us what we want, right? But also we want that let me scroll back up. We want that background color and that border radius, right? So what we have to do is, let me just get rid of this color here, leave the linear gradient, right? Grab a div. I'm going to call this div button secondary wrapper. Just put the button inside of here, right? Grab this wrapper, give it a background color of white, and then just change the radius to 20 pixels. Or what is it? Is it 20 pixels? No, 1,000 pixels, which is a lot, but it looks good. So just change the text to I'm flexible, like that. And that's it. All I have to do now is add some padding to the bottom to maybe make, no, that's margin, so 50 pixels padding to the bottom of our hero content. Make it even more, 70 pixels, right? So this is perfect. We have a button. Now all I want to do is when I hover over this button, so hover, not on this one, so grab the wrapper, right? Because that's where our background color is set, so hit hover. And then we just want to make the background a kind of off white, very like subtle difference, like that. So now if we hover, just like that. The last thing that I want to do is add a border radius to the hero content. So just subtle border radius like that. And now if we hit view, now if we hit view, you can see that because it has like a max width of 1240 pixels, it's kind of being pushed to the side and not in the center anymore. So to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to just grab our hero content wrapper, and we're going to set it to be flex, vertical, and center aligned, like that. So that is it for our hero section. Next up is our cards. last time we ended with these, with this hero section with the buttons, but this time we're going to get started on these cards, which when you hover over them, they flip and reveal a back. So they're like this 360 turning cards. Okay, so let me start by dragging in a container element. Now this isn't related to this particular what do you call it? This isn't related to this particular section. This is kind of just for the rest of the sections moving forward, except for the footer, because we kind of want to center everything onto the page like this and give them a max width. That way they don't become too big and the images don't get really distorted. So we kind of want everything to be in the center of the page like it is in here. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to make a container, and it's going to have 100 pixels of padding on the left and on the right. And it's just going to basically contain all the elements inside of here. And it's just going to have, it's just going to be set to flex vertical like that. And yeah, justify start. So anyways, focusing on the card section. So I'm just going to drag in a div, call it card section, set flex, horizontal, center align like this. I'm going to give it some margin at the top of about 40 VH. And I'm doing this because, well, there needs to be some space between this and the hero. Sorry for the car alarm sound in the background. I'm going to make it 30 VH instead. God, that is annoying. Okay, anyways, a max width of 1240 pixels. Like that. And just set width to be 100%. Then, what I'm going to do is drag in a heading element. And this is going to be called heading 2. So just change it from H1 to H2. And basically it's going to be just as bold. It's going to be Nunito Sans like that. 35 pixels. Change the color to be black. And give it a margin at the bottom of about 40 pixels. Okay, so this is, what does this say? Inspiration for your next trip. Like that. And actually in this card section, I don't want to align everything like this. I'm going to hit justify to the left like that. Okay, there. Now inside of here, I want to drag another div, and I'm going to call this cards. Okay, this is going to be set to display grid. It's going to have a gap of 24 pixels. And it's going to be 4 columns, and it's also going to have 1 row, and that's it. So I'm just going to set the width to be, oh, sorry, it should, let me go back to the card section. It should really be flex horizontal, vertical, and like that. Sorry, I messed that up. Okay, so this is our cards, right? So this should have a width of 100%, like that. And we have 4 columns to input our 4 cards into. Okay, so now inside of these, I'm going to create our first card. And this first card is going to have a class of card wrapper first. Okay, now this is going to be aligned, stretched, and justified stretch. So it takes up the entirety of this kind of column that they've given us here. And I'm going to scroll down, and this is for our what do you call it, our flip transition later, but I'll explain in a second. But this is so we're going to go down to 2D and 3D transforms, and we're going to make the children perspective really much, like a lot. Like I maxed it out. I made it 2000. I think you can even go higher than that. Let's try. You can. I'm just going to leave it at 2000, like that. Okay, so I'm just going to make that big, like that. Now, now that we're done with that, I'm going to drag in another div, and this is going to be our card. Okay, this is going to be set to flex vertical. So this is how like stuff is aligned, right? Flex vertical. Give it both a width and a height of 100%. And then what I want to do is set the position to be relative, and go down here and set cursor to be pointer. Now, that's our card element. But now we want two other elements. We have the card front. If I hover, it'll flip. But you have the card front, and then you also have the card back, right? So we're going to start off by creating the card front. So card front. This is going to be set to position absolute, and I'm going to hit fill like that. And then I am going to drag in an image. And then I'm going to drag in a div into our card front, and I'm going to give this class of card image. This is going to have a width of 100% and a height of 50%. And it's basically going to be an image of our first card element. It's going to be cover and center. Now you can't see it just yet, so I'm going to go back to my card wrapper, and I'm going to give it a minimum height of 300 pixels, like that. Just so that it can be bigger than this, but this is also the minimum height it had. So it can be bigger, but it has to be at least 300 pixels. So that is our card image. I also want to give it a radius, because if you look closely here, the tops of our image has like a radius, and so does the bottom. So I'm just going to give it a radius, so 10 pixels at the top left and 10 pixels at the top right. We will do the ones for our next part, the card text. We'll give that a radius too. So we're going to drag this like that, call this card text. Give it 20 pixels margin at the top, right? And 16 pixels everywhere else. And then I'm going to set it to be width of 100%, a height of 50%, like that. And change the background color to this deep orange. Then I'm going to give it a radius, so 10 pixels at the bottom left, 10 pixels at the bottom right. And then I'm going to drag in a heading once again, and I'm going to call this heading 3, right? Or make it an H3 element, and change the class also to heading 3. And then I am going to get rid of all the margin, 0 here as well. And I'm actually going to change the font color, obviously, make it 27 pixels, so it's just a little bit bigger. Change the weight, that's fine actually. Nunido Sands, where's that? Right there. And that's it for our heading. So I'm just going to call it Ocean City. Then I'm going to drag in our first paragraph element, give it a class of paragraph, and actually just change this card text, make it not height of 50%, like that. That was just for us to be able to see it at first, but we want it to be able to exceed 50% as well, even if so that way our card can be bigger than that if it needs to be. Okay, there we go. I'm going to change this text to 80 miles away. Let's go back and just make it a minimum height of 50% then. It can be bigger than that if it needs to be. So paragraph, I'll rename it paragraph 1, just in case we have other paragraphs. Again, same font, make it white, and 15 pixels, so just a tad bit bigger. And that's it for the front, at least. Next up we have the back. So card back. This one should also be set to position absolute, and just hit this fill button. Flex vertical center aligned, like that. 16 pixels padding on all sides. Give it a background of black, like that. Give it a border radius. Just go to here so that we can set it all parts of it, like that, 10 pixels. And then I am going to drag in this icon. Yep. We could change the size, but I think that's okay. And then I'm just going to drag in this paragraph element. Give it a class of paragraph 1. What should it say? Alright, there. I will actually give this a class, so card back icon. Some margin at the bottom, 30 pixels. And I'm just gonna give this paragraph 1 a combo class, card back. That's not what it should say, sorry, card back paragraph. And just hit center align like that. So now if we go into view, obviously nothing's happening, right? We haven't set up the interaction, but also we can still view this card. We don't want me to view the back of it yet, right? We only want the back to be seen when we rotate the card. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the back. We're going to go down here to 2D and 3D transforms, and I'm going to hit the plus icon, and I'm going to hit rotate, and then I'm going to do a 180 degree rotate. Now what this does is it's basically just flipping the card, right? Now if you can think about that, right? Basically when the card front is visible, right? The card back is on the opposite end. So it's flipped 180 degrees, right? Like they're not both facing the same direction. That way when you flip it, the card back is faced at like the perfect 0 degrees so we can read it, but the card front is faced at 180 degrees. That's the kind of effect we're going for, right? So we're gonna first set it to 180 degrees, right? Then I'm gonna click on the settings here and hit back face hidden. Then I'm gonna grab my card front and go to the 2D and 3D transforms there as well and hit back face hidden. And then what I wanna do is just grab this card wrapper, go to my interactions panel, mouse hover, and just hit start an animation, right? We're gonna call this card flip hover in, right? And all I wanna do is I wanna grab the card, right? And I wanna hit rotate and then 180 degrees, just like that. So if we play that, perfect, right? I'm gonna just change the duration, maybe make it 0.4 seconds, and maybe hit ease in. There we go. There we go. Perfect. And on hover out, we just want to grab the card flip again. We're going to call this card flip hover out. And all I want to do is just grab the card and rotate it 0 degrees again. So now if I hover and I hover out, perfect. This is exactly what we want in the card. Now I'm just going to make a couple more of these. So hit save, grab this card wrapper. Now the only thing that changes between these is kind of the background color. That's just for design purposes, but I can do that too. So grab the card text. This is going to be called 2. Change the background color to this. Number 3. Obviously, you can go in and change the text, but I'm not going to do that because it would take too much time and not really help you learn anything else, but I'll do this just for design purposes. Did that even change? That did. Okay. So this is the cards section. We did a flip interaction, and yeah. Next up, we have the experiences section. Last time, we ended with this cards section, like this one right here. But this time we're going to be working on the experiences section, which is basically similar to this one in that we have cards, but instead of flipping, like we have with this one, they start an animation, that scales the background, brings in this part, and also brings in this text. So we have like this kind of hidden section that appears, and some text as well. So that is what we're gonna be building. Okay, so let's just get started. I'm gonna drag a native, call it experiences section. No, like that. I'm gonna give it 60 pixels at the top of padding, just so that it's a bit separated from this card here, and also give it 100 pixel padding to the left and 100 pixels to the right. I'm also going to set it to have a width of 100%. And then what I'm going to do is take the same heading that we have in our card section and just paste it onto here. Get rid of that 100 pixel padding actually, because I forgot about the container. Obviously our container already has that padding, but yes, so inspiration for your next trip, just change that to this text right there, like that. And then I'm gonna start by dragging in our actual cards. So I'm gonna call this experiences wrapper. And this is going to be a grid element, again, similar to our cards up here, with 24 pixels of gap, one row, and 2 columns. That's it. Okay. Now, inside of here, I'm going to drag in our actual experience. Put it in here, experience. Set the position to be relative, which will be necessary later, and set the cursor pointer down here to be, the cursor to be pointer. And then what I want to do is drag in an image. Right there, experience 1. Call it experience image. And basically this image is going to span the entirety of this, like that. Okay, so that's our image. What I also want to do is actually go to the experience again and give it a border radius so that it's like nice and rounded off. So what we're gonna do is, the reason we can't see that is because even though it has a border radius, what's happening is that this image, even though it has this border radius, this image is like spilling over it. It's overflowing. So to fix that, we're gonna go up here to experience, overflow, and we're gonna hit hidden. Now you can actually see the border radius. I might actually make it a little bit more, maybe give it 30 pixels of border radius instead. Okay. Then I'm gonna add the overlay that we need, because if you look closely when we hover, the image darkens. So we're gonna call this experience overlay, and obviously we have to hit position absolute here, right? Because we want it to be positioned over the image itself. So I'm going to set position absolute. I'm gonna hit fill, and then what I'm going to do is give it a Z index of 40. And that's it for now. When we work on our animation, what we're gonna do is we're gonna just change the background color from this transparent to this kind of light, transparent, almost transparent black. So, but for right now, we'll just leave it how it is. So that's our overlay. Next up, we have our text, which again, if you hover, right, we have our text. So the text is going to be sitting inside of a wrapper, which is how it kind of like affects, comes out of this kind of, how do I, the text is going to sit in a wrapper. So we're going to call this, if I could type, experience text wrapper. Again, set position to be absolute, because we kind of want it on top of the image again, but with some space on here and on here. So it's going to be position absolutely, and all I'm going to do is just, not that actually, just hit 80 pixels over here and 80 pixels from the top. So that is our text wrapper. I'm going to give this a z-index of 45, because if you remember correctly, our experience overlay has a z-index of 40. So the text wrapper, I don't want it to be covered by the overlay. That's why I'm giving it a z-index of 45. Then what I'm going to do is drag in another div, and I'm going to call this div experience text. And this is just going to have a heading 1, that says things to do on your trip. And let me just increase the height, so maybe make it 50, 55, I'll go 60. Okay, like that. And I'm gonna do this, that way it's like this. Okay. And what we also need is to make this button. So I am going to, inside of this, drag in a button element. And this button element is going to have 14 pixels of padding on the top and the bottom, 24 pixels of padding on the left and the right. And I'm just going to change this background color to be white, change the text color to be black, and make it Nunido Sans, make it bold, and make it a bit bigger at 16 pixels. And I want this to say experiences. So, okay. And I also want to give it a border radius of, where's that? Border radius of 10 pixels. 15 pixels. Okay. So that is our button. I should probably give it a class. Let me rename that. This is going to be button primary. Like I explained before, the button in our hero is our button secondary, because we don't just use it as much as we use this one. So yes. So that is this part of our experience text wrapper. The next thing that we want to do is this part over here with this kind of hidden section that pops up, right? But before we do that, if you notice, at first you don't see any of this, right? So we also want to change some things. So we want to grab this experience text wrapper. We're going to hit overflow hidden. And then we're just going to give it an opacity of 0%. So it's invisible. Then what I'm going to do is get started on our experience hidden section. So going to grab it, call it experience hidden. And basically this is going to be flex vertical and then center aligned, right? I'm going to give it 30 pixels of padding at the top, 30 at the bottom, 40 pixels to the left, and 40 pixels to the right. It's going to have a width of 100% and a minimum height of 225 pixels. It's going to be positioned absolutely, and it's going to have the same z-index as the text, because we also want it to be over that overlay, which has a z-index of 40, right? So that is that. Then inside our, actually, I want to give it a background color. And if you notice, we can't see it, which again makes no sense, right? Because why won't we be able to see it? We gave it a background color, everything's there, right? That's because, if you remember, we went to our experience and we hit overflow hidden, right? That's why we can't see it. So just for our design purposes, we're gonna hit overflow visible, right? But then later on, before we start our animation, I'm gonna hit overflow hidden again. This is just for us to be able to see what we're actually making, and once we're done doing that, we can always turn that back on. So experience hidden, now we can view it. Now inside of here, I'm gonna drag in another div. I'm gonna call this experience hidden item. Set flex to be horizontal. Horizontals, and it's going to be space. It's going to be aligned to the start and space between. And it's going to have a width of 100%. Then I am going to drag in an image, which is this one right here. And I'm going to give it a class of experience hidden item. That's not it. Let me get rid of that class, sorry. Experience hidden item image. And it's going to have a max width of 200 pixels, so it can't get bigger than that. And it's going to have a margin at the right of 20 pixels, which we'll see why we need that in just a second, but that's what it's going to be right now. And then I am going to drag in another div, and I'm going to call this experience hidden item text. Text, not text. It's going to be flex vertical and align to the left, and yes, it looks good. Okay. Now inside of here, I just want to drag in a heading 3. So just gonna drag in a heading, give it a class of heading, choose heading 3, right? And then find the heading 3 class. And then what I'm gonna do is just grab our paragraph 1. It's easier to paste it in, so I'm gonna just do that like that. So this text says street art, and like this. Okay, so that is our item. Now I'm going to just duplicate this, close out this card section, duplicate this experience so that we have our second one too. And I'm just gonna hit overflow hidden like I said I would. And that is that. Now the next thing that we want to do is obviously our animation. So I'm gonna grab our experience, go to the element trigger, I'm gonna hit mouse hover and start an animation. This one's gonna be called experience hover in. Okay, and okay, the first thing that I want to do, let me just open this up again. The first thing that I want to do is have this experience text. Let me open that up. I just want it to move down 180 pixels. So let me move it down, sorry. Now, if I bring up the opacity on that, so let me grab the experience text wrapper and give it a full opacity, right? Now, the reason that I want to move it down is, and it is because when the experience wrapper, right, it stays exactly where it is. So if I move the experience text, what's really happening is, let me do that. So this experience text wrapper has overflow hidden, right? But if I grab this experience text and let's say just give it some margin, do you see what's happening there? Like, it's kind of the experience text wrapper, right? It has this like set width and set height that's into it, right? So if I move the experience text, what's really happening is that it's being moved out of the boundaries of the experience text wrapper. That creates like this really cool effect of it just coming out of nowhere and like appearing out of this box, right? That's why we want to set overflow hidden to add that effect. So that's what we're doing there. Now let me just go back and set opacity back down to 0. Then I'm gonna go here and start over. So grab the experience text, not the wrapper, just the text, right? And I'm gonna move it down 180 pixels. Then I'm gonna grab the experience hidden, and set opacity to 30%. Now these are all my initial state things. So I want this to happen I want this to be how it is in the start. So I'm just gonna grab these, hit shift and grab them, right? So that I can grab 2 of them, and I'm gonna hit set as initial state. Okay, we have one more thing to set as initial state, and that's the experience hidden item. So if I just grab that, and let's see, I'm going to move it -100 pixels. So if you look at that, it's just moving to the left a little bit. I'm just gonna place it after this, like that. Now let's start our actual animation. So the first thing, let's observe. Okay, so the first thing that happens is that this image darkens, right? So the image scales and then it darkens, and then this thing comes up, and then our text comes up. So that's the order that we're gonna do it in. So I'm gonna grab the experience image, right? I'm going to scale it 1.2. And again, because of our overflow hidden, it's scaling inside, but you don't really see what's being spilled out, what's overflowing. And then we're just gonna darken our overlay. So I'm gonna hit background color on our overlay and find this kind of dark, almost like that. And that is the first part of our animation, right? I want to change the duration of this, make it 0.4 seconds. And then what I'm going to do is start the next part of our animation, which is to move this experience hidden up like that. So I'm going to grab experience hidden. I'm going to hit move. And I want this to happen after the image scale, right? I don't want all these to happen at the same time. So I'm going to hit, for just the experience hidden, I'm going to hit a delay of 0.2 seconds. So it happens kind of sequentially. So first the image scales, then this happens, then the text comes up. So that's the order that we're going to do it in. So a delay of 0.2 seconds, and then I'm going to move it up -100%. So I'm just moving it up the entirety of its of itself. And then what I want to do is change the opacity of this. So I want to make the opacity 100%, right? And then after a short delay, what I want to do is I want to grab this hidden item, right? And just change it. So before it was moved -100 pixels, right? But I'm just gonna hit 0 pixels, right? So it moved back to its original spot. And I'm gonna give it a duration of 0.4 again. And I'm gonna give this, put this right here, and give it a delay of 0.4 seconds, like that. And then what I also want to do is the next part of this animation, which is basically where I grab our text wrapper here, right? I set the opacity to be 100%. So text wrapper, opacity 100%, right? And then we just grab this text, which is all the way down here. Remember, because in our initial state, we moved it all the way down here, even though this text wrapper is up here. So we're gonna grab our text, right? And I want to move the text back to where it was, so it's kind of appearing. It gives the illusion that it's appearing out of nowhere, when really I just moved it down. So this stuff happens after this one, but with a delay of 0.6 seconds. Okay, and now let me just grab all these items. So again, I'm selecting one, and I'm hitting shift as I grab all of these, right? I'm giving them all a duration of 0.4 seconds. Now if we play this through, that looks really good to me. Let me try that one more time. Perfect. Now we can just change this these settings. So maybe give it an ease in. Yeah, I think that looks good. So that is our hover in animation. Now we also need to make a hover out so that we can return everything to its original state. So to do that, I'm just going to make a new animation, call it experience hover out. And the first thing that I want to do, I'm just going to go in order of how I did them and undo them, basically. So first thing I want to do is put this image back to how it was. So scale 1, right, which is its original, how it was originally, right? And then I want to get our overlay, not filter, sorry. We're going to hit background color, right? And just give it a fully transparent background color like it was before. And then I'm going to grab my experience hidden, right? Move it all the way down again. So move, right? I'm just going to give this a delay of 0.2 seconds. And then I am going to move it down, or bring it back to where it was originally, so 0%, right? And then I'm going to grab my hidden item, move it to -100 pixels, which is, again, like our initial state. I'm also going to give it a delay of 0.4 seconds. And I also want to grab our hidden and give that an opacity of 30%. And then I want to finally grab our experience text, move it, give it a delay first of 0.5 seconds, and move it down 180 pixels. And finally grab our experience text wrapper and set the opacity down to 0. So now if we hit save and try this out, so hover like that, okay. Now all we have to do is grab our experience section and just make sure it has a max width of 1240 pixels so it's not too big. Just try one more time. So hover like that, and I hover out. That looks perfect. Now for this last one over here, I just want to change the image and just add the interaction, and then we should be done. So grab this second experience, mouse hover, just start these animations. Now let's see. Perfect. So that was the experiences section where I took some of Airbnb's own website, and I also added my own interactions and Webflow to them. So we ended last time with this kind of experience section that, as you hovered, gave us this really cool animation. But this time we're going to be working on this section with these gift cards and some text and a button to the left. So I'm going to start by grabbing a div block, gift cards section. I'm going to give it 60 pixels padding at the top. Set the width to be 100% and a max width of 1240 pixels. I'm going to set this to be positioned or have a display of grid, and it's just going to be 1 fractional unit for the first one and then 2 fractional unit, so that kind of the second column is obviously is always 2 times bigger than this one. And then I'm just going to get rid of these because I only want 1 row. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab a div, place it into this first column here, call it gift cards text, and just set the flex to be vertical and left align like that. And then what I want to do is grab a heading, place it into here, give it, what does this look like again? Let's go heading 2, or heading 1 looks good actually. Just heading 1, or maybe heading 2 is better. Let me see, heading 2. No, I think I'm gonna do heading 1 and just make a combo class. So heading 1 and give it a combo class of black and just change the color like that. What does it say? Shop Airbnb gift cards. Just gonna add that. And then I'm gonna scroll up, find our button. It should be in here, I believe. Copy it and paste it into this text right here. Now our button also needs a black class because as you can see, it's kind of blending into the background. So I'm just gonna give it a black and just make it white as well, like that. Okay. So that is this part. Now I'm just gonna close this up and drag in our image to the right so that it's like that. That should actually be placed inside of this section. I don't want to do, there we go. Now if we just hit view. Okay, I think I'm just gonna increase the padding a little bit, maybe make it 100 pixels. I think I want to give it some space. Yes, okay. So that is it for this gift card section. It was fairly simple, just reusing some of the elements that we have before. So yeah. So we ended off last time at this kind of gift card section, and we only have about 2 sections left. So this one's pretty easy. It's just a basically an image and with some text and a button on top of it. So let's just get started. So I'm gonna get a div, call it hosting section. Give it a width of 100% and a maximum width of 1240 pixels as usual. And then what I'm going to do is grab an image, the hosting right here, put it inside. Now this image is going to have a class of hosting image. It's going to have a width of 100%. Yep, just like that. Then what I want to do is grab in another div, call this hosting text, a width and a height of 100%, and set position absolute on this. For this to work, however, we have to get our hosting section and set position relative on that. Now if we set position absolute and hit full, yep, it should be spaced out just like that. I'm gonna give it 80 pixels of padding to there, or like spacing, right? And then what I want to do is grab our text. So why am I going to the assets panel? So grab our text. It's gonna have a class of heading 1. Maybe leave it a little bit bigger. I'm gonna call this heading 1 hosting heading, and just make it really big, so like 80 pixels, and just copy and paste this and give it a much bigger line height, so 80 pixels, maybe even more, 100 pixels. It's too much, 90 it is. And then all I want to do is grab our button. If I can go find, well, we have the dark one here, but I'm just gonna get the other kind, so just plop it in there like that. And what I want to do is grab this hosting text and actually just not give it a height of 100%, because what I want to do is set this to be flex vertical and align to the left, and I want to set space between, that way they're at the bottom like that. And I also want to give it some padding at the bottom that. Okay. And last but not least, of course, I'm going to give it a border radius. I'm going to grab our hosting section, set overflow hidden on this, and then go down and give it a radius. 20 pixels is perfect. So that is the hosting section. This brings us to the last section of our Airbnb website. And this is just going to be a footer. So I'm going to grab a div, give it a class of footer, set some padding at the top, 60 pixels, or not padding actually, let me take that out. Sorry, margin, because we don't want this to be included in the height, so just margin. Give it 48 pixels of padding, and 100 pixels of padding on the left and on the right. And then what I want to do is give it a background color of this kind of off-white, gray, light gray. And I'm going to drag another div inside here, call it footer content, which is basically going to take up as much space as it can of the footer itself, and it's going to have a max width of 1240 pixels. Now I'm going to start by building out the footer top. So just going to grab this, give it a class of footer top, set it to be flex, horizontal, and space between. Give it some border at the bottom. If you look down there, you can see the border. So border bottom of 1 pixel, and DDD, which is this, again, off-white, slightly darker than our the background right here. And then what I want to do is grab a list, place it inside of here, call it footer links wrapper, get rid of the bullets, so hit no bullets. And then what I want to do is grab one of these list items, the first one, call it footer links title, get rid of, or actually just type in, what does this one say, support, and just set it to be, again, our font, Nunito Sans, 800, so it's very bold, and change the color to this darker shade of black or gray. And this size looks about right to me. And what I want to do is copy this these links, just because they already have, again, the link. And I'm just going to grab this, call it footer link, and change the font. Okay, and then we're going to go get the actual link inside here, give it a separate class, and just change the color to be black. And then what I want to do is set there to be no decoration, and then when we hover, we want the decoration to be on again. So those are our links. Just going to get rid of this last list item, copy this a couple more times, give it some margin at the bottom, so margin of 20 pixels, that's way too much, 10 pixels, 15 seems like a good in between. And then our title should also have some margin, so 20 pixels, yes, okay. Now all I want to do is grab this, duplicate it a couple times, and that looks about right. That's our footer top. Now we have our footer bottom. So footer bottom, give it some padding at the top because we want to space it away from that divider there, that border at the bottom. Set this one also to be flex horizontal, And then we want to grab a paragraph element, place it inside here, call it footer copyright. Just copy this entire thing. And grab all these links, give them the class that we already styled, the link class. Link, there it is, one more. Right there. Now just grab the footer copyright itself, change the font to that. Give it some spacing between all these dots here. Like that. Okay, so that's the copyright. And then we have our footer socials. So I'm gonna name that appropriately, footer socials. Set this one also to be flex horizontal. Actually, we're gonna go back to that footer bottom and hit horizontal, aligned, and just hit space between. That's right, yep. Now inside here, I just wanna drag in our icons. If they would, okay. Call it footer icon. I can spell icon. Width of 18 pixels, some margin at the right of 24 pixels, and just set the cursor to be pointer. That way when we hover on them, it looks like we can actually click them even though they don't lead anywhere. Now I'm just going to change these. Let's replace the image to this one here, and finally this one here. Now all these resources, all the images we've used this entire project will be available in the description. You can just download the files from my GitHub repository there, and you can just follow along. We have one more thing left to do, and that is, of course, adding this scroll interaction. So as we kind of hover throughout this website, you see that we get like this scroll progress bar that pops up. So that's what we're going to do now. And I'm just going to drag in an element all the way at the top, call it scroll indicator, a width of 100%, a height of 10 pixels. I'm just going to be position fixed. The background is going to be this linear gradient. So open this up, linear gradient right there, 90 degrees of an angle. Change the colors. And this should basically have a z-index of 1,000 because we kind of want this to be on top of every single animation there is. We want this to be over the cards, over here. When we hover over these elements, we want them to be over all of this. So yes, 1,000 seems perfect. Now, all we have to do is just animate this. So grab the scroll indicator, go to page trigger in the interactions panel, and hit while page is scrolling. We're gonna call this one scroll indicator. Very original, I know. At 0%, we want the size to be 0%. And 100%, I want it to be 100%. Pretty easy logic to understand. Let's just go try it out. That works perfectly. Okay, so that is it for this Airbnb video. As you guys saw, I kind of recreated the website and added my own interactions and spins just to show what Webflow can really do and the powers of interactions and how easy they definitely are with using Webflow. As you guys know, if you want any resources to any of the files here, like all the images, they are all linked in the description down below. Yeah, that's it for this video. Follow me, make sure to follow me on Instagram, subscribe to this YouTube channel, like, and comment. Bye.